Okay, it looks like we are live. Happy Tuesday, everyone. This is Jesse Mechling, Director of Education at the Center for Coastal Studies in Provincetown, Massachusetts, coming to you today for our 11 o'clock Facebook Live Cool Marine Animals I Have Seen. Hope everyone had a nice Monday. So today we're going to journey back to the Galapagos for another cool marine animal that I happen to see there. The world's only marine lizard, the marine iguana. So we'll get started with the presentation. Let me pull in the slides. All right, so the marine iguana, which is the only marine lizard, the only lizard that's able to forage at sea. I realize it should say 11 subspecies, not subspecies. Sorry for that. Marine iguanas are believed to have come from an ancient ancestor from South America and split with their land-dwelling cousins in the Galapagos 4.5 million years ago. Interesting, marine iguanas and land iguanas in the Galapagos, which only inhabit the Galapagos archipelago, are actually, after millions of years of separation, are actually still able to interbreed, and they occasionally do, resulting in sort of hybrid iguanas in the Galapagos, which is quite interesting. Despite my little error there are actually 11 subspecies of marine iguanas. This goes back to a new research that came out in 2017, and not surprisingly, different islands have different subspecies. I imagine this is why Darwin's idea of evolution was so influenced by work in the Galapagos. As many different islands, we learned a little bit about it with the Galapagos sea lion last week. How many different islands animals will evolve differently, and there used to be believed to be 8 subspecies, and now it's believed to be 11 different subspecies on islands throughout the Galapagos archipelago. Marine iguanas are only found in the Galapagos, as you can see here from their range. So marine iguanas will typically range from 12 to 56 centimeters, or 4.7 to 22 inches. That's their body length. Without the tail lengths can reach 6.7 to 33 inches, or 17 to 84 centimeters, which means that these animals can grow up to 1.3 meters, or 4.3 feet, even closer to 1.5 meters, or 5 feet for large males. But of course, that varies by island. Iguanas who live in the northern islands, the smaller northern islands in the archipelago, like Darwin and Wolf Islands, are typically much smaller, with an average body size of only 19 centimeters, or 7.5 inches, compared to the subspecies that are located in the southern islands, Santa Cruz and Isabella, which are the islands where I saw these animals, where they average body size 35 centimeters, or 14 inches. So quite different, almost twice the size between subspecies in the southern archipelago versus the northern islands. Again, this is not this is typical in the Galapagos. You have many species distinctions there, and they are also sexually dimorphic. The males will grow larger than the females. They're longer and can weigh almost twice as much. Despite their fierce appearance, marine iguanas feed almost exclusively on red and green algae. They're harmless herbivores. They feed in the intertidal and subtidal zones. Their tails are actually flattened, which allows them to swim more efficiently. And they have claws. These long claws here you see are used to cling to rocks on land or underwater in heavy currents, which I can attest the Galapagos has very heavy currents. I was caught in one time diving, not a very fun experience. They've also been observed feeding on crustaceans, insects, and even sea lion afterbirth, but their primary diet is of algae, red and green algae. After hatching, young iguanas generally won't take to the water until they are a year or two old. Although they can swim, they are capable of swimming after being born. They generally won't go into the water. And interesting, young iguanas after hatching, their diet consists of feces of the adults until they're old enough to go into the water and feed on algae themselves, which is a quite interesting little statistic about these animals. Marine iguanas are actually capable of diving down to 30 meters and 98 feet for up to an hour. However, typical dives are much shorter because these animals are ectothermal, which means they need to regulate their body temperature by the environmental conditions. Water in the Galapagos can be relatively cold. It ranges between 11 and 23 degrees Celsius, or 52 and 73 degrees Fahrenheit. And by foraging water, these animals can actually lose their body temperature, can drop as much as 10 degrees Celsius or 18 degrees Fahrenheit. So they spend much of their time basking in the sun to regulate their temperature. Interesting about their foraging behavior is that individual iguanas will return to the same area to feed day after day, and some of the larger males might go further offshore. They're typically the iguanas that would forage further offshore and in deeper waters. The rather large males. These animals are able to slow down their heartbeat when they're in the water. Quite interesting. Interesting when food is scarce during times of El Nino, when water temperature increases and the algae that they depend on, which is a cold water species, tends to die back. These animals are actually able to lower their size, their body size by 20%. And subsequently, as El Nino recedes and their food source returns, they're able to return to normal size when food becomes abundant. In terms of breeding, these animals breed every 1 to 2 years, although when food is generally every 2 years, but when food is abundant, they may breed once a year. And to conserve heat, they will oftentimes, as you can see here, bask in the sun or be in large group and sleep together. They'll sleep under plants and crevices, particularly young ones. If weather is cloudy, they'll find crevices or under rocks that have been heated up. So breeding typically takes place every 2 years. Females typically lay between 2 and 3 eggs, which hatch about 2.5 to 4 months later. Females will defend their nesting site from other females who might also be laying eggs and go and dig it up. And as we mentioned, when they're born, these little iguanas will live off the feces of the adult iguanas until they're a couple years of age. They reach maturity. It's estimated for females between 3 and 5 years of age and males 6 to 8 years of age. And their typical lifespan is about 12 years, although I found that they amazingly may live up to 60 years, which is quite amazing. The iguanas become more colorful. You can see this one here. It's kind of got red during the breeding season, and different subspecies of iguanas throughout the islands have different coloration. In some islands, they're very colorful. In one island, the iguanas there are known as Christmas iguanas because they're a really bright red color, which is quite amazing. And one of the cool things about these animals, or maybe not so cool if you happen to be standing too close to them, and they are quite docile, is that because they feed in the marine environment, they will excrete salt. When they come back on land, they have large nasal glands and will basically sit and sneeze out or snort out salt, and this gives it this white appearance. So you can see this iguana here on its head. It's sort of white. This is salt, and you can see all those volcanic rocks that are also colored white by the snorting iguanas. It's quite funny to see that they do it quite often. If you're sitting there, they're just sort of snorting out the salt excretions, which is quite funny. If you've ever been to Galapagos one day or are able to go, you'll find that these these iguanas are located everywhere, on every shoreline, and sometimes not on shorelines. I saw them in the fish market in the main town of Santa Cruz. It's estimated that there are between 200,000 and 300,000 marine iguanas throughout the Galapagos. Of course, this varies quite differently among populations. In some smaller islands, there's only numbers in the couple hundred. So these subspecies of iguanas can number very low. And in other islands, like Ferdinand and other large islands, they numbers in the thousands. So they are quite abundant, but they're still considered threatened, and certain subspecies are considered vulnerable to extinction. Their main threats come from non-native predators like rats, feral dogs, and cats who eat their eggs. And with El Nino events, their food and increased water temperature, their food resource can decline. We talked about how they're adaptable to that, but as climate change continues, it's anticipated that El Nino events may become more severe and stronger in the future, which could potentially lead to less food for these animals, and also there's an increase in invasive species of algae, of brown algae in the Galapagos. There have been records of this of the iguana eating the algae, but it's not sure if that progresses what will happen to their food resource. Well, that's it. I love this last picture. Iguanas can bond as well. So I want to thank you all for joining me today. That's about it. We're out of time. And I hoped, oops, wrong side. I hoped you enjoyed learning about the cool marine animal today, the marine iguana. Galapagos is an amazing place. If you've been there, or if you ever get a chance to go, it's quite amazing for all the endemic sea life that's there. So that's all for me today. I hope you will join me again tomorrow for another cool marine animal. Tomorrow's Earth Day. So we'll have a special animal, one that's very close to my heart and important here in Cape Cod, where these programs are coming to you from. So have a great day, stay safe and healthy, and to tomorrow. So long.